Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and finally getting a chance to play with some of the new stamps and dies from the Simon Says Cherished release. And I started off with some Canson XL watercolor paper that I die cut with the largest of the new wonky rectangles dies. And I die cut them with the smooth side facing up. And then I'm lining them up in my mini Misty here, and I'm using images from the new Summer Flowers stamp set. So I'm lining up the stem and leaves stamp first, and I'm stamping it with Simon's Barely Beige ink. I did that video recently using that to watercolor with, stamping the image with this ink and then watercoloring it, and it just had this really neat, almost no-line effect. So I wanted to try that again, and I also wanted to compare it to just stamping in black and watercoloring. I also did a video similar, doing, heat embossing, doing one in white, doing one in black, and watercoloring, and a lot of you guys liked seeing the contrast and the difference between the two. So I thought I would try that with this. So one of the images is being stamped in Simon Says Intense Black ink, and then the other one was being stamped in that Barely Beige ink. So I'm still going to experiment. I think in the end, I'm going to say you'll see more as like the images get colored in. I want to experiment more with stamping images in different colors. I think with this one specifically, it would have worked better if I'd stamped the stem with the Barely Beige, and then if I'd stamped the actual flower itself with one of Simon's yellow inks, like Lemon Chiffon, etc. I think that would have worked even better because yellow is a very, difficult color to work with, and because it's so light, it didn't absorb into the lines like the other colors do, like this green. But what I really love about that Barely Beige ink is how you still see the detail. It's different. I like how, because especially with these specific images, they have those little stitching details here and there in the petals and the leaves. I really like that, because that's my one thing too with no line coloring is I don't have the patience to take the time to watercolor really, really slow and do one little tiny area at a time and then, paint back in all that detail. I just don't have time for that. Even here, like I have super sped this up, but I honestly didn't take that long to watercolor these because I literally just didn't have the time. And two, because I was doing two of them, it was just taking longer. So I think altogether it took me a good half an hour maybe to color these all in, which isn't bad. But if I'd really taken the proper time and done, the more detail and all that, there definitely would have been, it would have turned out even nicer, but I was like, nope. I just wanted to add in the color, keep it simple. So like I said, I super sped this up. I used my Mission Gold watercolors for this and used the same colors on each side. We just kind of mixed them in. The one thing I do like, obviously, by stamping in black is there's less pressure. You're basically just like coloring in. Whereas stamping with really pale colors or trying to do the no line, you have to be a lot more careful to make sure that you go right up to the edge and get that detail, etc. So again, personal preference. I do like both, but always when it's being compared to something with a black outline, the black outline is always going to stand out more. And when I did the background, I used a really heavy hand, so it wasn't as fair of a comparison because I feel like that really made the colors pop a bit more. Because on the no line, I'm using like air quotes that you guys can't see. On the no line, I kept the background very subtle because I was scared to get the colors like messed up in that because it took quite a while to do that. So the one with the outline was much easier, but like I said, I had a heavier hand, but both of them turned out just fine. So they were fun to kind of experiment with. And then of course I had to add splatter because, so I pulled up my Prima Metallics palette. A lot of people asking about this one. This is a great palette. It's not quite as comparable to the Fine Tech in terms of quality, but for the price, you can't beat it. And they're such pretty colors. I still love this. As always, I'll be switching back and forth between everything always. That's just the way I am. But yeah, I used the really pale kind of silver, white color and splattered that. It's really subtle. It's nicer in real life. You can see it. It just gives it that little shimmer without being too obvious. But because that wasn't enough, I also used my Copic Opaque White and scraped that onto the edge of my acrylic block and then watered it down a little bit. And then that way I got some white splatter, which got everywhere because I didn't use my splatter cubby, but I wiped it up. So yeah, just ran the brush. You just flick the brush against the acrylic block and it creates, a more detailed splatter. So I did that, set it aside to dry. And then I die cut the words, the Painted Enjoy and Painted Hugs dies from Simon. I die cut those from some dark chocolate cardstock, which for me is a stepping out of the box a little bit. Usually if I'm going to die cut sentiments, it's usually either white or black, keep it just the same old. But when I was looking at this, because I'm like with the sunflowers, plus I wanted to use some twine that was not black and white, I was like, why not just die cut the sentiments from that? It's such a dark brown though that honestly it's a subtle difference. Especially on camera, it's kind of hard to tell, but it's subtle, but I like it. So I die cut them, both of these sentiments, 3 times from that cardstock, and then adhered them all together with my Nouveau adhesive. So press them all together so they're stacked 3 layers high. And once I'd done that, I decided which one's going to go on which card, because I thought since I'm making 2, I'll do different occasions for these cards. So I figured out which one I wanted to use, and then for the one with the enjoy, I wanted to stamp a sentiment. I didn't realize I was just off camera for that. But I lined it up in my Misty so I could stamp a word from the Thoughtful Messages stamp set, so I could stamp the word today with that same intense black ink. And that's why I chose to do that with that sentiment, because I thought it would just work better with the black outline of the flower to have that sentiment stamped in black. So stamped it with my mini Misty, and then I'm going to adhere the sentiment with my same Nouveau adhesive there. So I just try to apply it to the thickest areas, and like I feel like such a broken record, but I know not everyone watches every single video. Trying to not apply too much adhesive so it's not oozing out the sides. This doesn't dry as matte as Ranger's Multimedia Matte Adhesive. It does dry clear and it's not tacky, but it's not completely matte. So it's a little more obvious. That's what I love about the Multimedia Matte Adhesive, is that if it does ooze out, it dries matte and it's very difficult to see it. Whereas this, you have to be a little bit more careful with. So after I had everything adhered, I grabbed the twine I wanted to use. This is the new to me, Lawn Fawn, I think it's Hot Cocoa. And it's more of a hemp twine than a basic baker's twine. So I like it so far. So did my same trick with holding the bow in place, or the knot in place, with my reverse tweezers, and then tied it in a bow and then trimmed off the ends. And then once I had both those done, I want to go onto my card bases. So I'm using Simon's Sea Glass cardstock for this. So I grabbed a sheet of this and I'm going to cut it in half so that these pieces are 4 1/4 by 11. So I can score it at 5 1/2 to create top folding A2 sized cards. So just use my paper trimmer for that. And I just I line it up at the 5 1/2 mark. And then I use the groove for the cutting blade as my guide for the bone folder. So scored both of those, and then I'm going to put these back into my mini Misty here so I can stamp the insides. I had tested on a scrap of paper and I really liked how the Barely Beige ink looked on this cardstock. It gives it a bit more obvious of a look than stamping with either a watermark ink or stamping in the same color of ink. Plus it saved me my laziness from having to get up and go grab the coordinating ink. So I lined up the sunflower images again, and I'm stamping them onto the inside of these cards with that Barely Beige ink. So I did the stem first, stamped it once, put in the second card base, stamped the second one, and then back and forth and did the same thing. It made things go much quicker. So then I can lay out the flower top itself, ink it up, stamp it, move on to the next card base so that they're both stamped into place, just quick and easy. And then once those were stamped, I wanted to add sentiments from that Thoughtful Messages set that was part of this new release. So I had 2 different sentiments since I'm making 2 different themed cards like I mentioned earlier. So I lined up the sentiments I wanted to use in my first card, and then I'm going to ink those up and stamp them again with the Misty. And I'm glad I did, because especially you can prepare brand new stamps. When they're brand new, they don't stamp as perfectly. So you can rub with your hands or rub with a white eraser. You can also ink it up multiple times or ink it up with Versamark and then wipe it off. It just helps the ink to adhere more to the stamp so it stamps cleaner. But again, because I'm always pressed for time, that's why I love the Misty, because then I can just stamp it multiple times until it stamps perfectly. So I stamped the sentiments on the inside of both of the cards, and then I adhered both of these card fronts with some foam tape so they're popped up off of the card bases. I was going to leave them as is, but then I decided to add some sequins. It's kind of funny that I use them so much that when I don't use them, people leave. I get a bunch of comments about that, like, wow, I can't believe you didn't use sequins this time. I was like, oh dear, you use them a lot when. But I pulled out the Pretty Pink Posh Sparkling Clear Confetti, these ones that are flat with slightly cupped edges and no holes in the center. They're really cute. So I sprinkled those rather liberally on both these cards and adhered them into place with the same Nouveau adhesive, and that finished these off. So as always, I will have links below the video to my blog post with links to all the supplies used and all the pictures. So all that info will be in my blog post, which is linked directly below the video if you guys are interested in that. And thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye!